Hi, Cara.
Well, hello, Vanessa.
This episode could be called any number of things, but we're going to sort of go with the concept of when we care about stuff and our kids don't care. Or
That's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, I'm trying to move away from profanity in my mature age. Or they appear not to care. So that's an important distinction.
Significant caveat.
This episode, we're going to cover like a bunch of relevant topics because there's many places where this dynamic shows up. And I just want to offer up a few of the questions we're going to be thinking about as we hit like actually quite a wide variety of topics. So like the big question is, we are worried about something, we have anxiety about something, we care deeply about something that has to do with our kid, and our kid just like doesn't seem to care, right? So the big question is, how do we handle it? The smaller questions, no less important, are, do we step in or do we leave well enough alone? Do we believe them when they say they don't care, or are they just like covering up for uncomfortable emotions they don't want to talk about? And what if we know they should care because we know down the road it matters, but right now they don't care and we don't know how to make them care about something that has long-term impacts but doesn't feel like it has short-term impacts. So those are some of the things we're like fomenting as we consider
I think
this.
that third point is really the solid gold of this conversation, which is like, we're pretty sure there's, fill in the blank item is relevant and important to them, and they're pretty sure it's not. And that is infuriating at times. It is dumbfounding at times. It stretches from everything from things that kids do to their bodies, right? Whether we're talking about choices around drug use, or I'm flashing back to my own childhood where I used to play with my little leaded pencil that, the one with the lead pieces that you would put in.
Oh, the mechanical pencil.
The mechanical pencil. Thank you. And I used to tap it against my index finger. And then sometimes the little lead mark would stay for a long time. My mom would just lose her marbles over like, you can't put lead near your body. And I'm like, it's just like a little thing. And I knew it drove her crazy. And I used to like, are they antagonizing us? Are they not antagonizing us? Like, but so sometimes it's body, sometimes it's choices with friends or relationships or dynamics like this,
or academics or sports or career or college,
it's
right?
So meta what we're talking about.
So meta. So there's a few things that I want us to get out of the way.
Okay.
Which are the ones where it's kind of like, you got to kind of leave them be and they'll come to you when they care.
Okay. So, what's your list?
So my list is sort of like these early puberty situations where we can step in, but we want to step in sort of gentle ways and not sort of force the issue. So it's things like deodorant use. It's things like bra wearing. It's things like hygiene, like skincare stuff, where I think we're playing a long game with our kids, right? They're going to have these breasts for likely the rest of their lives, unless they make some surgical decisions. They're going to be taking care of their skin for the rest of their lives. They're going to be like having, figuring out their hygiene routines. And so if we sort of make it a battleground in really aggressive ways, because we're worried they're going to be made fun of, or they're going to look different than other people, or they're going to, have a pimple or so, we got to play the long game and just be like, offer up some options, give them some choices, be in conversation. But this is not a like head-to-head battle. Those are like some of the things that I feel are like, we got to be gentle and deliberate with them.
I mean, not going to die on this hill category of things.
Correct.
Basically. And I think it's important to say this is not to conflict with advice that we give elsewhere on this podcast and across all of our channels, which is really these conversations are important and they need to learn these skills and all the things. You're not saying any of that is untrue. What you're saying is there's a point at which We get incoming from parents and trusted adults all the time. That's a version of, you've said it's important. I know it's important, and they don't care.
Right.
What do I do? And you're saying, and I agree with you, pick your battles. There are some things that will be better learned from friends or siblings. There are something you're trying to save them from someone telling them they smell. You're trying to save them from showing up at PE with no bra on and having to run a mile, and it's not that comfortable. You're trying to, and at a certain point, and every school educator will tell you this, they will say, let them learn the lesson. And that's true. That's the category of stuff that you can kind of, I think, let go.
Yeah. And with all of the topics we're going to talk about, the ones that we're kind of like, hey, don't die on this hill, like play the long game here. And the ones where we're like, oh yeah, like dig in, here we go. We're bringing our baggage to this. We're bringing our own experiences. We're bringing our own priorities and sets of values. We're bringing our own life lessons to this. So recognizing that in each of these topics is critical, because the more baggage you bring, the more elevated you're going to be, the less capable you will be of having a calm conversation with a kid. The more you deal with that reality and that knowledge ahead of engaging with the kid, the more effective your conversation with them will be. So if you were a kid who was an early bloomer and had breasts and felt super self-conscious of having breasts before anyone else did, and you wore a bra the second you could, and you wore shirts that hid everything, and you've got a kid who's walking around developing breasts, doesn't care, doesn't wear a bra, will wear whatever shirts on the floor of their bedroom, you better bet that's going to bring up a lot of stuff for you. Clock it, find your trusted adult, talk to your trusted adult, and think very deliberately and thoughtfully about what the conversation with that kid is going to be.
That's the easy category. There's a middle category before we get to the harder piece of when we care and they should and they don't, which is the majority of this episode. But there's the middling category of when we care and they should, but they don't need to today. And they don't.
Or maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they
shouldn't.
Maybe they have another perspective. So like a good example of this, Cara, I think is around friendship. Not the big heavy friendship, but like our kid has one or two close friends and they're great and they're like have their buddies and they have a blast and they do their thing and they're doing lots of fun things together, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, wait, you're a tween or you're a teen. You're supposed to have a gang. You're supposed to have a crew. Like your life is supposed to look
that's right.
Like the kids in a John Hughes movie.
That's right.
And they're like, what are you talking about? I mean, obviously we don't use the John Hughes references because when we show our kids those movies, they're like, oh God, I can't believe these are the movies you grow up on. They're like really troubling. But, sometimes it's just like, we have a vision for what our kids' lives are going to be like and the path through which they're going to move through different stages of life. And they're like, no, I'm good. Like I got this version of life and I'm doing fine. And they're mentally well and they're happy and they're connected and they're just doing it their own way. Like, again, friendship is super important. Belonging is super important. They just don't have to do it the way we imagine they're going to do it.
And I think that's really important to figure out how to get into conversation about that with them in a way that doesn't shut them down. Yeah. Because chances are what lights your social fire and what lights your kid's social fire is different. I mean, that's just the reality. And so as they get older, these conversations don't really change in their substance at all. If you have a kid who has one or two close friends and that is what works for them, and you were a person who had a posse and that was what worked for you, you will never be comfortable when your kid is a tween, a teen, in their 20s, in their 40s. You will see them home on their own when they're not with their one or two people, and your brain will always retreat to what's wrong. And their brain is often living in the space of, this is amazing. I get to have my time and my space for myself. And when I'm with my one or two favorite people, I'm with my one or two favorite people. So figuring out how to get into conversation with a kid about why you care about what you care about and why their value system might be okay or better than okay for them. That's really important. And that takes some practice.
And sometimes you don't talk to them about it. You talk
Correct.
to, your spouse or your friend or your therapist, because sometimes their choices about friendships means they're not invited to all the parties and they're not included in the things that you sort of hang your hat on as like milestone high school moments or middle school moments. And you're like, oh my God, they're missing out. And they're like, I'm good.
Right.
And I think this is probably where you're going to go.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes they say they're good, but actually that exclusion or that sort of outsiderness feels hard, but they don't feel comfortable expressing that. Or they feel like if they admit, hey, sometimes it's hard not to be included in everything. Like I'm good with my friends, but I kind of wish I got invited to some of this stuff. That opens up criticism to the path they've chosen.
Self-criticism. They feel, yes, criticism from others, but self-criticism. And they will often say, it feels worse to talk about. Like, it's my reality. It's how life is going. And I don't want to talk about it. Of course, we know from our own life experience, we know from you and I, Vanessa, from the gift of speaking to people who work across the spectrum of all of the things that impact tweens and teens. How many therapists we had on this podcast who will all speak to the fact that just because something feels uncomfortable to say doesn't mean you shouldn't say it, because that's one way of then owning it and deciding what you want to do with it and getting past it. I find the concept of manifesting really interesting with, especially with Gen Z. It's like there's this whole idea that you can manifest your future or your reality. And the way I read that is it's a way of articulating what doesn't feel right and identifying what you want. And if we avoid mocking that and instead recognize it for what it is, it's kind of an awesome way into conversation with kids. Like, sure, you can manifest having a massive birthday party, and they might be presenting it as, I'm manifesting it because I want you, Mom, to throw it for me. And what you recognize is what they're really manifesting is they want a bunch of people to show up for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, by the way, don't yuck their yum by overanalyzing their manifestation. Instead, just have other conversations in other scenarios that help kind of get to the core of it so that they can solve for it, and what they are hoping for can maybe become their reality.
And let's be honest, kids are really good at the sort of like, here's what I want things to be like at my birthday in 2 weeks. We're having this conversation now. I have no idea how to get from now to that vision I have.
Bingo.
Or the things I have to do in order to get to that point feel really uncomfortable to me, or I don't have the skills to do it. And so you get left in this moment, and this is going to apply to the rest of this conversation, where it's like, they want something to happen. They know how to make it happen. They also kind of don't want you involved, or they're going to tell you they don't care because they don't want to deal with all the skills they have to build or all the things they have to do in order to make them happen. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Today is my kid's birthday, and he wanted to have friends over. And I was like, great. It's June in New York. We finally have sunshine. And I was like, did you text them? And he's like, not yet. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I'll do it later. And the next day, did you I'll go to the store for you. I'll order the pizza. Did you text them? Not yet. So I finally said to him, listen, 4 years ago, I did not organize a birthday party for you. You have held a grudge about my failing to organize a birthday party for you for 4 years. You are now saying you've got this. You're handling it. I'm asking you to handle it. You're not actually doing anything. I don't want you to end up on your birthday having no one come over because you didn't ever actually text your friends.
That was brilliantly managed. I was going to rant and say, what is it with this generation? And they are like dug in that future planning is a hard no, and all good things happen at last minute. It makes me, I am a planner with a capital P. It makes me bananas.
Wait, you're going to love this. So I have a series of times over the last few weeks where I'm in long car rides with my kids going to take care of all sorts of stuff that's like about the transition from summer, school to summer and next year and trips and camp and whatever. And my kids get in the car. I lock the doors and I'm like, okay. And my daughter did this amazing impression of me where it was like, okay, let's make your packing list for this. What are the 3 things you need to get to your college counselor? And she's like, I'm trapped with you and you're asking me to do the most annoying things ever. And I'm like, okay, that's your perspective. I hear it. It's super not fun. Think about it from my perspective. I have an hour where we can get through all of the stuff in which I bear some responsibility, at least to make sure you get it done. To make me do this at another time or to have me on your ass over and over again when I have you as a captive audience, tough shit, kiddo. We're going to do it now. And she's they're all allergic to it, but they've now given over to, they've surrendered to it.
And so that is the category, not of when we care and they don't. That is the category of when we have to deal with it and they don't.
Yes.
And I think that deserves a special asterisk and a special place in heaven, because we do need to frame for the kids in our lives that there's a difference between what we care about and what we have to manage.
Right.
And where we're going to go in the next part of this conversation is really about the things that we care about. But when it speaks to things we are in charge of, that they have to play a role in, people, that's a carve out. Name it. Lock them in the car. Do whatever you need to do to trap your audience and engage them in those tasks, because if you don't, battles begin.
Right. And I'm they're I'll take care of it. I'm but you're sitting with me and you have this little handheld computer in your hand when you can. And my youngest does the best impression of me. He's like, let's go through what homework. This is the drive to the bus. Let's go through what homework you have. Have you met with your teacher? No, email them right now. I am not, this is my moment. I'm already chauffeuring you. Get your stuff done.
Oh, Vanessa, he's just at the stage where he's talking the talk before he's walking the walk.
Right. Right. So then his older brother is chimes in with the evergreen, what strategies could you have done? Could you have used? And I'm just at this point, I'm on the floor laughing so hard because they see through all of it and make fun of me. Yeah, push back. I don't care because we're going to get this done and I'm going to move on with my life. So this is the tactical stuff. But then we get to the more existential stuff. So, Cara, I come from a long line of mostly actually men in my family and my husband's family and generations before that who actually were not particularly successful students. They were not terrible students and they had very rich, full lives, right? Beyond that, it was performance and sports and lots of friends, but grades were not a major priority. Now, an astute person might draw a line between maybe it didn't come easily to them and they didn't particularly enjoy school and maybe they all had undiagnosed learning differences and therefore it wasn't a priority because it was hard for them and they weren't good at it and they prioritized other things. Fine. Whatever the case may be, I have swum in the waters of being with people for whom grades are not a major priority. Not they don't want to fail and they don't feel good about failing, but they're also not really determined and taking the extra step towards great academic success. Couple that with my own experience, which is school generally came easily to me and I got good grades. And that was very important to me. And it allowed me to go on and do all sorts of stuff in school and out of school that was like really wonderful and opened my life up to me. How do we handle it when like things are fine? There's nothing like tragic. We're not facing like expulsion. Although there have been many people in my family put on academic probation in various generations. We'll get my dad on the podcast to talk about that. But how do we measure, like, how much do we push? Where does the sort of intrinsic motivation come from? When do we stop being the extrinsic motivators of our kid? Like, we care, we understand how important it is. We're writing the story of like many years down the line, college and jobs and grad school. And they're just like, kind of just like doing okay and floating down the lazy river. Like, how do we navigate that?
Right. So asked in a more generic way, separate from grades, but we're going to use the grades example as we weave through. How do we handle when there's a real consequence to not caring, but also maybe not any consequence at all? Right. And the reason I want to take the grades out of it and just go really generic for a second is, I mean, that's the truth. Like, the men in your life who fit this mold have also had great success.
Right.
And so
there's not a great I told you so with any of them. Correct?
There's not. And I think this is a perfect example. Grades are a perfect example of, for most people, succeeding in school sets you up for success either at the next school, right? Which sets you up for job success or higher earning capacity, or it sets you up for self-esteem success, right? You feel better about yourself because you've accomplished what the world has asked you to do well at this age, right? But for every example that you can find in that direction, you don't have to look that hard to find an example in the opposite direction.
Just come sit with my family.
Just move into the Bennett house. And we are surrounded by people like this. And frankly, sometimes achieving success that's like everyone does better if you have this turns out to not correlate with some moving on to the next level of schooling or moving on to a job that feels fulfilling and that can pay for a home and food. And like, sometimes the effort in actually is not met with any kind of guarantee. So I think grades are a perfect example of, we care because they are the best thing that we have right now to measure how well a kid is able to check certain boxes, to follow instructions, to retain knowledge, to apply that knowledge, to be a good citizen, to follow rules. Like, there is we could come up with a zillion check marks, right? This is the best sort of yardstick we've come up with, but everyone knows it's not a perfect or a near perfect yardstick. And yet, how can we, as parents and trusted adults, say we don't care about this yardstick? Like, what kind of parenting is that?
Right. So, one of the things that I really appreciate about my kids' school is that they not only have letter grades, but they have effort grades.
I love that.
And the effort grades more realistically line up often with what I'm observing at home and kind of the gauge I have of my kids than sometimes the letter grades do. So some kids have, subjects that come easily to them and they don't put in a ton of effort and they do well. And it's sort of like, great, whatever. And sometimes kids have subjects that are very difficult for them and they work really, really hard and they get a totally mediocre grade, but they have busted their butts. They have tried different strategies. They have met with their teacher, all of those things. And so the strategy I take with my kids is I actually don't care about the grades. Like, I care if you fail because that means like you don't get credit for it or you have to take the class again. I really care about the effort. And I will give a perfect example. One of my kids took intro to psychology this year in college, and he absolutely loved it. And he got a totally subpar grade. And he went to the professor several times. He tried different studying strategies. He joined a study group, like on and on and on. And I finally said to him, I care that you love this class. I care that every week you come back to me and you quote something to me about this class. I don't care. I actually actively don't care what your grade was. I care more that you will stop taking this class because you're worried you didn't do well in it and that you won't pursue this area. And I am telling you, I want you to pursue this area no matter what grades you're going to get. And I felt like, and he's now going to minor in psychology. And that might mean his GPA will be less good than it might have been if he didn't, but he's really jazzed by it. And so I think for me, it was a lesson. And if you told me 10 years ago, I would have had that conversation with my kid, I would have laughed in your face. So I think part of it is figuring out what effort are they putting in, not what is the output, what is the input, how does it affect them emotionally, what gets them jazzed, what gets them feeling really crummy about themselves, like getting to that part of the experience and less about the number or the letter.
Yeah, I mean, the experience that I have had, not just with my own kids, but in conversations with all different kinds of kids, ranging from teenagers through 20-somethings, is that this is hard because the world actually cares how you perform. It's, impossible to get into medical school these days. I never would have gotten into medical school by the criteria that are laid out in front of the kids today. My kids are not going down the path of medicine. I have talked to, I can't even count anymore how many kids over the years, and watching the metrics change and watching the hurdles get higher and higher. This is all great in theory. It does not pan out in practice. If you do not get certain grades, doors are shut. And
for certain paths, certain paths, you can't take the approach I've taken and still find a way.
And I will add that for other paths, it takes a lot of gumption to shed that association between how I perform in something and my passion for doing this down the road. And the battle that I have been in at home for now, I would say 2 or 3 years with my kids, is I cannot figure out how to communicate with them that success to me looks like find something that lights your fire and go for it. Because while they hear me and they don't disagree, they think that's a very Pollyanna way of approaching it. And it's just not realistic. That's me trying to give them the gift of pairing what's interesting to them and what they can do with it. Scott Galloway would say, get a job in the thing you're good at and have a passion on the side. My feeling is
Samson sent me that video.
Yeah. I mean, he said it 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. And on the one hand, okay, that's actually really practical advice. On the other hand, life is a really long marathon. And if you're not spending time working in a field that lights your fire in any way, and all you're doing is doing the thing that you're good at because you checked the boxes and met the metrics that were set out for you in 3rd grade or 6th grade, and that is what is determining your life. Of course, I'm not where's the happiness factor? And I think it's going to be different for everyone, but my kids and I have been in this constant, and all my kids' friends, I ask all of them, and we're in a constant back and forth around this, because I'm like you, Vanessa. I really love when I see things click with different kids. And I think the world becomes a better place when someone who's super interested in psychology ends up going into psychology, and not when that person ends up going into name another field, and whoever it is who should be in name another field because it clicks with them goes into psychology because they think they're supposed to, right? Like we all benefit from people tapping into what they inherently resonate with, but it's a privilege. It's like, it doesn't always work out. And this is hard. And so to the theme of this podcast, which is when we care and they don't, I think the shift that happens through the high school years, certainly by the time that they are closing in on the end of high school, is this shift from we kind of know what they're good at and where we think they'll thrive and succeed in the world. They may have very different ideas about that. And so what we care about and what we're trying to double down on is sometimes not that relevant to where they see themselves or where they want to go. And that shuts down a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, so listeners, you may remember when I was contemplating forcing my kid, who's an amazing performer, forcing him to take musical theater next year. And Cara and the rest of my family and the entire universe.
I like how I'm in your family.
Yes.
Cara and the rest of my family.
And the rest of my family. You all made it very clear. I could not force him to do it as much as I wanted to. However, we struck a deal, which was couched in these terms. I said, I care that you find some passion and something that interests you and lights your fire in the context of school. I know you have it in other places. Here are two places I see you really, like, in your own ways caring. One is performing and acting. And you've told me you don't want to do that. The other place is history. And I said, if you're not going to do some sort of drama or theater class, then you need to take a history minor. And he was like, deal. And then we were going through the history minors, and I had all sorts of opinions about which history minor. And he presented to me the one he wanted to take. And I said, why do you want to take that one? Because I was like, oh, it sounds like not that fun. And he goes, oh, two of my friends are taking it. And I was like, okay, like I made the deal. We struck the deal. He's gonna follow through on the deal in his own terms, right? The social stuff is super important to them. He's choosing the history minor based on who else is in the class. Fine. Like, you got it. Deal. And so I think it's when they're little and it's like, you know, do you want fish sticks or do you want pasta for dinner? Like sometimes when they're older, it's like, you know, they like fish sticks and pasta, but like you just need them to choose. And when I think about kids and sort of this pathway towards becoming and are seeing down the line and they're seeing 4 inches in front of them, sometimes we got to kind of lead the way with some of these choices. Now, there is a type of person in their lives who can have more impact than we can on these topics. And we talk about them all the time, Cara. In your family, it's often an older cousin. In my family, it's usually an older sibling who will offer up a perspective of why they should care when they don't seem to care. And I want to get into why that is so effective.
So, Vanessa, the trusted young adult, I'll call it, right? The trusted sibling, cousin, best family friend, amazingly powerful in message delivery. So much so that sometimes it's helpful to know the message they are delivering, because I've had many, many experiences now across all different corners of my life, professional and personal, where if that advice, that delivery is so phenomenally impactful, and then you ask what they actually said, and then you're like, no, that was the wrong piece of advice, or I totally disagree. So I will start here, and then I want to tell you a story about a speaking event I did this week. I don't think I told you the story yet, but I'm going to start here by saying it is totally well within your rights and great in terms of a parenting or trusted adulting move to flag when you disagree with the advice. You'll decide what you do with it or not. But the reason I think it's important to flag it and be in conversation is it allows your kid to eventually be a critical listener when it comes to the older person who is giving them the advice. And in my own house, I will say, my kids' older cousins are invaluable resources to them. These days, the advice that is coming their way from cousin to my kids is like, I'd say about a solid 70% of it is good. And a solid 30% of it is like, really? I'm hoping my kid doesn't listen. And what's amazing is the conversations we will get into after the advice is given, where the cousins will leave and my kids will turn to me and say, this is what I agreed with. This is what I didn't. And they just want to use me as a sounding board. Let me pull back and share a quick story about a speaking event I did this week where I was talking about social media use and, the pros and the cons and the, time suck and all the things, right? And there was the Q&A session, and there are about 100 people in the room. And very back row, hand goes up. And you know me, if I don't have my glasses on, I can't see who it is. And so call on that person. And kid stands up and he introduces himself. And I throw my glasses on. It's fascinating. He said, I am an older sibling to a tween. And this kid is online all the time and is completely addicted to, and then he names a couple of platforms and says, I need help because I'm the person who's the loudest voice. And he was this kid who's asking the question was sitting next to his mother. And the mom is like, it's true. He matters more than I do at this. And the kid was like, I need help because this is how I'm approaching it. And this is how I'm trying to get him to get off these devices. But like I don't remember what the age difference was. It was significant. It was like about 6 or 7 years. He said, he's growing up in a different world than what I grew up in. And I want to help. And I don't know how. And it was such an amazing moment of partnership in the when we care and they don't, because I think whether it's an older cousin, an older sibling, whoever it is, generally speaking, there are a number of topics across which older kids and adults are in agreement over what matters. And you can be a team and you can lean on each other to get a message across to a younger person who needs the message.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. My oldest, who was not a super motivated student through freshman, sophomore years, and then as sort of college loomed more imminently, he became much more motivated, but he was still dealing with the results of, being a fairly just fine student, freshman, sophomore year. And he now says to his siblings, to their friends, basically to whomever will listen to him, hey, I know it feels like sophomore year is really far away from the college process. It actually matters. And it's a time when you can do well with not tons and tons of effort like you need to put in junior and senior year. Like, pay attention sophomore year, work hard sophomore year. Like it matters. And I've never asked him to say that. He offers it up. And the reason he offers it up is it was offered to him. And he did not take the advice from an older teammate of his when he was a sophomore, and he regretted not having listened to the advice. So it's now like 3 generations of this advice. We'll see if anyone actually ever has the brain development and maturity to listen to it. But I just thought it was, I think to that point, Cara, like these middle people, the sort of trusted young adults are very proud of the role they can play in kids' lives. I mean, he takes his responsibility as an older brother very, very seriously and takes real pride in his role as an older brother. And part of that requires our trusting our kids with not private information, not revealing stuff that shouldn't be revealed to siblings, but there is a sort of confiding that can happen. Like, hey, I'm really struggling with this thing with your sibling or your cousin or this family friend. I'm wondering if you have any advice for a way to kind of help steer the ship a little bit.
Right. And I think we could even get more specific and ask for guidance on how to help make them care. Like literally, because you led off this episode with an explanation that sometimes they truly don't care. And sometimes they're just saying they don't care.
Right.
And tapping into that sort of more proximate knowledge of the older sibling or that trusted young adult to say, what do you think? Which of these two do you think it is?
Yeah.
First of all, right? Like, and usually they know, and sometimes they don't.
And usually they know, and often they're better at parsing whether it's a self-esteem thing and the kid is saying they don't care because it's just too hard to care or to admit that they care. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, they really don't care. One thing that comes up in my house is preseason sports. So fall preseason soccer comes in New York. We play soccer in the fall, and it means you have to train over the summer. And for an incoming 9th grader or 10th grader, like that kind of preparation and training over the summer, a lot of kids are not developmentally there to really like plan ahead and do all that stuff. And my kids have tried to teach their younger siblings about how important it is and to get in shape, and they don't listen. And the frustration, and then they have to deal with the consequences of a timed run and they're out of shape, all of that reality. But the frustration my older kids feel in response to that, there's like a part of me that enjoys it because I feel like they get a taste of what it's been like for 22 years, like caring and trying to get kids to care and having them not care. And I don't want to sound like a really sick, vindictive person, but there's something in the realization of getting someone else to care that makes you realize, like, when your resistance or you put the boundaries up saying you don't care, it like gives you some insight and empathy into the process.
And here's a beautiful double whammy too. Sometimes that older kid, when tasked with helping us figure out, do they care? Do they not care? Will actually find their own intrinsic motivation for the next round of their life. So the example I'm thinking of, one of my kids is a little bit of a mentor to a younger family friend in their sport and, is frustrated because the family friend just doesn't seem to care. And my kid really cares. And my kid is a little judgmental about it, which we keep talking about. And I keep trying to remind him, like, okay, do you remember when you were that age? And maybe you weren't as motivated. I was always more motivated. Oh, well, maybe, there were these forces at play. No, those forces weren't at play, right? And it gets like into a thing. And when you get past the defensiveness and the judgment and you boil down sort of, hey, how can you figure out if he, the family friend who's younger, truly doesn't care, or whether there's something holding him back that wasn't holding you back? You watch these floodgates open and you realize that the older kid who's chaperoning the experience of the younger kid, that older kid is suddenly on their own learning curve. And they're figuring out how to communicate effectively with someone else, how to motivate someone else effectively, how to ask questions they never thought about asking before. And it makes them a better friend, a better mentor, a better future partner, like all the things. So there's this beauty of when teaching, that older teen, young adult generation, how to manage this frustration of, in my day, I used to care more. And these young kids, they don't. And helping them navigate that not only helps the younger kids, but also levels up the skill set of those older kids.
So for those of you in this moment, I think there's a way to let go of some things that are just not that important, right?
Oh, yeah.
B, recognize the ways in which your own baggage is driving this battle with your kid and doesn't need to, and you can kind of let go. C, figure out what really matters. So are you focusing on the wrong things? Are you focusing on, sort of numbers and letters when really the focus should be on kind of meaning or enjoyment? Or are you focusing on numbers and letters because your kid has expressed a desire for a certain outcome, and without those numbers and letters, that outcome's not going to happen? I point you to Jenny Wallace's book, Never Enough, for navigating that achievement reality. And then the last thing is, what are the tools at your disposal? How can you figure out, do they care? Do they actually really not care? And it's not worth it. Do they care so much, but it's so painful to care a lot and worry you're not going to succeed? And in this case, enlist the trusted young adults in your life, siblings, cousins, family, friends, camp counselors, all of those folks, because your vision may just be too clouded and you may not be able to see things clearly, but other people can. And it's a long game, and there's many, 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 many scenarios where you're going to have to figure this out, and not making it a massive battleground, but an ongoing conversation is really the path we're going for. And so enlisting other folks to help and to support is a great way to not make it a pitched battle.
You know what the follow-up episode is going to be, Vanessa? The 1 day part 2 episode of this episode. It's going to be, how do we figure out how to adjust what we should care about? Because the world is really changing. And with AI and all the things, you do stop and think for a second, at what point is it time for us to frame shift a little bit? Until then.
Dun, 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 sequel coming sometime in an undisclosed moment. But yes, I love that idea. Like 2 spaces after a period, for example. Sorry, for those of you who don't know, we no longer have to put 2 spaces after a period. That was a shock to me.
Also, Vanessa, I'm finally looking at the video, because I never look at the video while we record these episodes. And I have had something in between my front teeth the entire episode. And those of you who are watching on YouTube, you're welcome for that laugh.
Wait, but hold on. Let me see. Smile.
Right there.
Oh, I can't see it. To me, it just looks like that space between your teeth. Because
when we care,
I knew you had something,
they don't.
Yeah, if I knew you had something between your teeth, I will always tell you.
That is friendship.
That is friendship. That's one to grow on. Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.